Good Friday morning of the 20th week. I made this already and I deleted it. Not by on purpose. I just sloppy. Okay. Oh God. The Pharisees heard Jesus had silenced the Sadducees. They gathered together, and one of them, a scholar of the law, tested him. Teacher, which commandment of the law is the greatest? He said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments. When I said before, which got wasted because it's lost, was this really meant so much to me, this text, but also as interpreted by the abbot Columba Marmion in Christ Alive at the Soul, which I read around 1961, 62. I was in the seminary at the time. And my confessor, Father Simon Wood, God, what a wonderful man. He recommended that I read the Christ Alive at the Soul. At that point, I was so scrupulous and so legalistic and frightening. I was so afraid of God, I have to say. I needed to be liberated, and Simon, he heard my confessions, and I think I used to frustrate the hell out of him, to tell you the truth, because it was so scrupulous. I worried about everything. I think one time I went to confessional. We used to go in the choir while we were making our mental prayer, and we would get up and genuflect, kneel in front of him, and he would know to hear our confession. So we would get up and we'd go to the confessional and he'd hear it. So I went, came back out, and for some reason I did something that broke a rule while we were chanting the office, or I forgot what. I started laughing at someone of my classmates. Well, that's a sin. Got up and I knelt down in front of him, went confession again to him a minute later, just minutes later. And I think he had his belly full of me at that point. He knew the scrupulosity. This was pathetic. And so I think it was it's a long time ago, 60 years ago. But he recommended I read Christ the Life of the Soul. And that's the mystical life of the faith centers on love, not on obedience and not on servility. Servile love, but a genuine love and a trusting love of God. And I began the first thing I really began to see was that God loved us. That God was a God of love, not a God of punitive God of judgment. And that liberated me. Beyond, I'm oversimplifying it. It was radically transformative. I never saw God again in that light. I saw him as my Father. The image I have of God is my Father. Like we say, our Father. I have to have some concept of fatherhood. My fatherhood was the guy who took his life vest off to save me so that I wouldn't drown. He would, I wouldn't. How can you miss when you begin to make that connection to the love of God? And therefore, the first of the commandments to love your God, love God, but not out of servility, but out of reverence and love. As I love my Father, not because I have to, but because I want to. See? It's not a commandment in the sense of a law or a rule. It's an invitation by the beauty of goodness itself and love itself. The love of a parent for a child could be the mother, okay? And our fidelity to God is not based on fear of damnation, but out of desire never to defame the name of God, never to disgrace the face of God. My mother said when we left home, never dishonor our name. She was wise. And this would be dishonoring the name of God, is to sin against him by sinning against each other. In our home, one of the things, Pete and I always found a way to bang heads, okay? That's fraternal competition, I guess you'd say, sibling rivalry. But my father couldn't stand that. In your home, you are faithful to each other, you see. You never fight each other. You never do harm to one another. He was right. I see that in the order. I see it in my department. I was chairman. Don't go fighting with each other. Got enough enemies out there. Don't. We're here together, you see. We're here together. Yeah. You don't have to like each other. You have to love each other, which means you look out for each other. I think of the kids in the old neighborhood. I know I don't make a joke out of it, but you look out for each other, you see. Not afraid of each other. You look out for each other. You're afraid for them. If I fear my family, it's I fear that I will never live up to their honor, that I will somehow dishonor them. That's unthinkable. It's horrific to me. But it's the same. The love of God means I don't see that I never want to dishonor him or dishonor Christ, dishonor our Blessed Mother, dishonor, act in such a manner that's disgraceful, as it were. See? A violation of his love for me, their love for me. See? That's the truth. See? And we love God by loving each other. He never separates the two. And so we look out for each other. We take care of each other. We love each other beyond mere fidelity, but actively, faithfully love each other by looking out for each other. Active fidelity. I've been distinguishing that a lot lately between passive fidelity is keep your nose clean. But active fidelity is you put the other person first. And you do whatever you can to enrich their lives and make their lives richer. If by nothing else, by being there. I remember I told you the story, I guess. I don't know, one of these, the man said about my father, he made the food taste better by talking to us, by enriching us. You see, by our conversation. That you have enriched the life of those that Providence has put before you, just by being present to them. You have made their lives richer. That's active fidelity, whether it's that in your work or in your lives and your family. See, I think there's something neat in that idea. It's too easy to say, well, I never did nothing wrong, but did you do anything right? I can see God asking us at the end of our lives, what did you do? What did you do to love, and how did you love those I gave you? The answer, I kept my nose clean. I never did anything unfaithful to them. I don't think that's going to cut a whole lot of ice, because I don't think that's enough. I said, well, what did you do? Well, I kept my nose clean. What did you do? So you kept your nose clean, big deal. What did you do? Did you hear the cries of your children? Were you present to your spouse? Present. One of the things I remember so much, and I'll leave you alone, is I think my father would come home from work around 10 at night because he was a waiter. And my mother was a school teacher. I think I told you this already. And obviously, she had to get up early, but she waited for my father, and I heard them talk. What I remembered night after night was listening to them talk, because often it would wake me. And I'd hear them chattering in the kitchen, chatting. They were looking out for each other. Even when my father went completely senile, my mother cared for him. He was still alive. I remember that line. She would take the bus every day to be with him, though he didn't know who she was. He had no idea. And when he died, I said, Ma, it's over. No more, Because I knew that what a sacrifice she made all those years, every day taking the bus. And she said to me he was still alive. He didn't know her, but he was still alive. That's fidelity. That's active fidelity, is taking the bus across the city to be present to a beloved stranger, person who had become a stranger. Right? Just neat, isn't it? I learned a lot from my family. I learned what fidelity meant, active fidelity. You give your life jacket to your child on a boat that could turn over. Taking a bus every day in the winter to go and be present all day to a man who no longer knows you. That's fidelity. It's not keeping your nose clean. It's taking a bus. It's taking off a life jacket. It's caring more about that person than that person's even capable of caring back. Isn't that neat? That's the truth, too.